Okay, so I mentioned in a previous video that the homework was going to be doing numerical integration and differentiation. That was wrong. I kind of got my order of things mixed up. What we're going to be doing, the homework assignment in this class for this week is going to be the following. I'm going to show you how to do a lot of it in this video and a couple after. But we're basically going to do something, for example, look at the numbers from 1 to 10. For each one of those numbers, compute the collat sequence, and then count the number of terms in that sequence, and then store the output in a list. So the output of this algorithm is going to be a list. The first element of the list is going to be the collat sequence for the number 1. The second element of the list is going to be the collat sequence for, or the number of elements in the collat sequence for number 2. The third item of this list is going to be the number of elements in the collat sequence for 3, and so on and so forth, all the way up to 10. And more generically, instead of going up to 10, we want to go up to a generic, n. So it could be 10 or 20 or 50 or 5 or whatever. Okay, but before I do that, I need to tell you a little bit about lists in Python. So a list in Python is a data structure, and like the name implies, it's just a list. And there are two important aspects of a list. It is ordered, and it is changeable. So you can make a list now and change it dynamically in the program. And you can also refer to like the third item of the list, the second item of the list, and so on and so forth. So just as a very basic example, I could say my list, one way to create a list is to just do square brackets and put the items in the list in the square brackets separated by commas. So I'm going to do 0, 1, cat, dog, and then I'll do another number again, 79. So now this is a list. There are 6 items in the list. When I run this, now my list is stored in Jupyter's program thing here. So if I print my list, it's going to just print out the list. Okay, so what happens if I want to access a certain element of the list? So if I want to look at the very first element of the list, so some of this is important. In most computer programming languages, lists and arrays are what's called zero indexed. Meaning if I want to refer to the first item of the list, it's the 0 index. So I'm going to do my list with a 0 in the brackets. And what this means, this right here is a reference to the first element of the list. So when I print this, it's going to print a 0. Okay, so maybe it's a little bit confusing. Is it printing out a 0 because there's a 0 there and a 0 there? Why is it doing that? So let me change the first element to -6, and now when I run it, it's going to give me a -6. On the other hand, if I print out 1, it's going to print out 1. If I do 2, that's the 0, 1, 2. This is going to be cat. Okay, so here's something interesting. I know that there are 6 elements in the list, so if I do 5, that's going to give me, 1, 2, oh, there's only 5 elements in the list. Okay, so if I do 4, that's going to give me the last element of the list. If I do 5, I get this error that says list index out of range. Because there's just 0, the indices are just 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, on the other hand, let's just say I want to access the last element of the list rather than, let's say I want to access the last element of the list. So it's kind of interesting. An interesting feature in Python, if you do 0, you get the first element of the list. But if you do -1, you get the last element of the list. If you do -2, you get the second last element of the list, and so on and so forth. If you go down here to -4, you're going to get 1. And now we get index list out of range because this is -1, -2, -3, -4, -5. So the -6 index doesn't exist. Okay. So that is a list. Now, another thing that we can do for a list is that we can iterate over a list. So I can say for item in my list, so what this is going to do, what this thing here says, it's a for loop, and it's going to look at my list here, and it's going to go to the 0th index item, then the second indexed item, the 0th index item, the 1 index item, the 2 index item, and so on and so forth. And for each one of those items, it's going to do something. So I could do something like print item. And when I run this, it's just going to give me a list of all of the, it's going to just give a printout of this list here going, -6, then 1, then cat, then dog, then 79. Okay, good. So that's what I get there. Okay, so those are some basic operations that we can do on lists. There's other operations that we can do on lists as well. Okay, one of the important things that we can do to a list is add an item to the list. So let's say I want to append, I want to add an item to the end of the list. Well, I can do this by doing mylist.append. Okay, so now what's going on here, and this will make a little more sense when we talk about classes. MyList is an object in Python. It's I'll say a thing in Python. And it knows how to append items to itself. So if you do mylist.append, you can add an item to the list. So if I do mylist.append, I'll add the word turtle. So now my list, in addition to having all of this stuff, has the last entry is going to be a turtle, and I get that if I run the same code. Okay, if I want to remove an item, I can do mylist.pop, and then if I do this same code again, I'll just get back to what I had at the beginning. Okay, now interestingly, if I run this code again, because in Python now, or sorry, in this instance of Jupyter, this is the list right here. If I run the same code again, it's going to remove, it's going to pop that 79th, that number 79 there, and we're just going to be left with this item, or that list. Okay, and I can keep doing this over and over again. And eventually, when there's nothing in the list, there's going to be an error. So there'll be an error here because it's an empty list, so you can't pop anything from it. If it's an empty list, you can't remove anything from it. That's, that makes sense. Okay, so now I'm going to get rid of some of these lines here. I'm going to reload this list. So now again, it's back to what we started with. The last thing that I want to tell you about is kind of a cool Python feature here. So I'm going to write it like this: for indexed item in enumerate my list. Okay, I'm just going to run this to make sure I have the syntax correct. It does. So now I can do the following. So now what's going on, instead of being able just to access the item, I can access the index of that item as well. So now I can have a sentence that says something like this: my list, my list of, and I'm going to put the index here equals this, so dot format index item. Whoops. And when I run this, the first line will say my list of 0 equals -6. The next one will say my list of 1 equals 1. The next one will say my list of 2 equals cat, and so on and so forth, assuming I've done everything correctly. So there we go. Okay, and this will be helpful. This could potentially be helpful coming up. We will use this when I show you how to do the programming project or the programming assignment for this week, which is to give the list of all of the number. Is to give a list of the number of terms and collat sequences for numbers 1 to up to some given number. Okay, again, I know that was a lot. I'm going to just show you this thing here. This is a list of all of the different operations that you can do on a list. I would suggest just playing around with lists and make a list, make another list, see what things you're allowed to add to the list, see what things you can't add to the list, and so on and so forth. Just because you can do some strange things with lists. So for example, my list.append, I could add this module math to my list. So now, like, my list contains a module. So if I run this code, everything works fine. And now if I run this, I'm going to have one more item in the list, and it's going to be the math module. Okay, so you can do stuff like this. You can have all sorts of data types in a list. This is Python's built-in list. We're also going to look at NumPy as well, which is very similar to this, but has even more things that we can do. Okay, but that's it about lists. That's it about lists for this video. In the next video, we're going to look at NumPy, which again, NumPy is kind of like a wrapper around lists, And there are lists in NumPy. There are NumPy lists that can do way more than even what the Python stuff can do natively. But this is a good overview. Again, just spend some time playing around with this stuff.